ones I bought was Rage. So that actually comes from this huge video store in Detroit.
So this is George C. Scott's first film as a director. Mm-hmm. The tagline on the box is, "An embittered father blows the lid off a government cover-up." His son is dead. He's dying. Overnight. Dan Logan's peaceful world has been shattered, and the only thing Dan has left is rage. A military installation has accidentally dumped a fatal dose of experimental nerve gas over Logan's Wyoming ranch and purposefully dropped a veil of secrecy over the incident. That's in quotes. With no one to turn to for help, Logan becomes both judge and executioner. George C. Scott, an Academy Award winner for Patton, stars both before and behind the camera in this blistering thriller. As Logan, the embittered father who sets out on a hell-bent rampage of revenge, Scott adds another brilliant, bone-deep performance to his impressive list of screen successes. And as a debuting director, Scott draws equally riveting portrayals from his skilled supporting cast, including Richard Basehart, Bernard Hughes, and a young Martin Sheen in one of his first major film roles as the cool, manipulative medical specialist whose specialty is deception. Like The China Syndrome and Warning Sign, Rage is an uncompromising story that's as terrifyingly vivid as today's headlines. Rage, said Los Angeles Times, quote, "really is enraged." A powerhouse polemic against the kind of military industrial shenanigans which makes the fiction so appallingly close to the truth.
Where did you get the word appealing in there?
Well, they broke up appalling,
okay.
And they cut it in like, and so it's sort of and then it like dash ling, and I am aging,
but it actually, but actually, the tomfoolery involved does make the drama appealing.
Yeah, actually, that is essentially what the movie is what is running amok other than chaotic tomfoolery?
But actually, the running amok actually is secondary to the frustration of the cover-up. Oh, yeah. That is the length of the movie. I mean, one of the things that you said that I thought was so funny that prompted half of my setup. We're watching the movie, we're like an hour into it or something, and you go, this movie is either the best movie for paranoid people or the worst movie. This is either the best movie ever made for a paranoid audience or the worst movie ever made for a paranoid audience.
That might be a good place to get into my capsule review.
Okay, yes.
Which technically is written in the voice of Franklin Browner or in the voice of
Bill Margold.
Bill Margold, but this one's clearly from me. Mm-hmm. Showing me this film in the year 2022 is akin to throwing gasoline on fire. And you knew that. You know damn well that I'm a conspiracy theorist whose most paranoid conceptions and conceits have been recently realized as true. Noah Webster had no definition for paranoia in 1828. It was a later invention made by others with a different agenda. The Merriam brothers defined paranoia as the unwanted or delusional belief that one is being persecuted, harassed, or betrayed by others, occurring as part of a mental condition. Well, sir, in the absence of a mental condition in this film, paranoia is better defined as ultimate awareness. One doesn't need a star chamber, a Bohemian Grove, a Skull and Bones, nor Davos and the lizards who attend the World Economic Forum. One doesn't need a cabal, even, for a conspiracy of the dutiful to occur. This is how systems fail humanity, in their effort to serve. George C. Scott worked with Stanley Kubrick on Dr. Strangelove, and from all accounts, the two became very close. One can feel Kubrick's strong thematic influence as Scott's sheep rancher character is stripped of his stock, his livelihood, his family, his pets, and ultimately his life, with no one directly nor singularly culpable for the crime. Should it come as any shock to any of us when a man stripped of everything he loves that he does anything other than run amok? Is that insanity or something more predictable? It was Shakespeare and Othello who wrote, "Men in rage strike those that wish them the best." 1972.
That's my favorite Frank Berger review. That was really good. Because it was just Roger sounding more pompous than normal.
I figured Franklin Browner is a little bit of a pompous ass.
Yeah, exactly.
He's also got a lot of my qualities.
He's also damn correct.
Well, I mean, that's the thing about this movie is that I'm watching it and I'm thinking, okay, so this has been going on forever. And all the characters are there. Like, all the kind of familiar characters we've seen wandering across our television screens for the last couple of years. They're there. George C. Scott, saw them back then and, they've been around forever.
Look, the idea of the story is George C. Scott is a sheep farmer living out in Wyoming with his son. Real man of the earth. And him and his son spend a night out camping during the course of the night. There's a local military base in town, and the government is testing a nerve gas that they have. Now, there is a big conspiracy and a cover-up that happens, but it's the cover-up that's the crime. The actual crime that actually ends up killing people is a legitimate mistake that happens, and they do a really good job of explaining that. They were testing the nerve gas in an area that was completely unpopulated. However, there was 10 minutes where the valve was on open
when it should have been closed.
When it should have been closed, they didn't know about it, and so there's
a genuine mistake. Actually, they make a point of that in the film that it's happened, and the government is even saying, shouldn't we have safeties on this?
Yeah, shouldn't we have things that have a safeguard against this? Well, yes, we do have airplanes.
We've started implementing that, but it wasn't on this.
But you still have us using a few planes that are not equipped with that function, and that is this case now.
That's just the reality of things.
And the gas is maybe only going for maybe 4 minutes or so. All right. I think at the end of the day,
it doesn't even reach the town, but it gets close enough.
Yeah. Maybe that runs about 45 miles or something like that. All right. In the course of time. But George C. Scott and his son are smack dab in that area. Now, George C. Scott slept in the tent. The son slept outside. So he wakes up the next morning and all his sheep are passed out.
Yeah, he comes out of his tent. His son has been sleeping outside.
Yeah, it comes out of his tent. All his sheep are knocked out, all with blood coming out of their nose. And there's his son knocked out, all with blood coming out of his nose. Oh my God, what the hell is going on? So he scoops him up.
In a really riveting moment where it's so realistic. And I was just thinking about the desperation that a father has in a moment like that, where he picks up his son and he then has to run from their campsite to the road, which I'm guessing, they're sheep herders.
Which is a long ways away because they went camping.
He has to run through a levee. He's got to run up a hill.
They're camping. They're not camping by the car, all right?
Carrying this kid, and you feel
agony.
In agony, in desperation, in a long, wide shot.
And George C. Scott is the kind of guy that, his whole thing is volcanic eruption, coming from underneath. And so it's like a death mask face, as he's worrying his son and is heavy.
Well, a man who's carrying a lot of weight in his soul, which I think he really was from being in war.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The way he establishes the connection that he has with his son, but not in corny ways, not in any scenes that are written to show them finishing each other's sentences or them enjoying each other's quirky humor. They're not those kind of people. He's a sheep rancher. He's not a poet laureate. He's not going to wear his emotions on his sleeve.
No, the most they do is they appreciate nature together.
Yes,
the kid finds a centipede or a millipede or something.
Yeah, he's a very masculine man who has taught his son masculine traits, and his son actually appreciates them.
He's learning from him.
Yeah, his son actually he
admires him and he looks up to him. It's a perfect father-son relationship.
It is, but it is one that is not verbal.
Yeah.
I really liked his son. As little dialogue as he had, it didn't matter.
Yeah, it felt real.
It felt real. And then but again, there's a class issue that really, I think, gets to the viewer in a big, big, big way. George C. Scott doesn't know what to do. He's not a doctor. And so he goes immediately to the doctors that he knows.
To the hospital. And
the hospital, the doctor,
family doctor.
The family doctor.
They're in a small town.
Yeah, so. Played by Richard Basehart, who I think is fantastic in the movie. Yeah. I think he's wonderful in the film. His character is revealed more and more as the movie goes on.
The more under conflict he becomes, and the greater the turbulence within him.
Yeah, and the more that's revealed, the more your heart goes out to him. Mm. He is cut from a same cloth of George C. Scott. He's a simple doctor dealing with simple problems in this Wyoming community. And so when he's faced with what's going on, he naturally goes to the higher medical authorities involved in this hospital and in this military situation, and they talk over his head the way they talk over George C. Scott's head. But everyone just kind of figures, well, of course we don't understand this. This is all over our heads, but they know what's going on, and they'll tell us what is best to do.
Because we, as Americans, are trusting of authority.
Especially medical authority. Especially medical and legal authority. All right. And you can even disagree with legal authority to some degree, but normally you feel like a crackpot if you're disagreeing with a doctor.
I was getting weird shades of Coma as I was watching this. I was,
but
having
frankly,
the after image of Coma.
Yes. But I can poke a zillion holes in the conspiracy theory that is supposedly Coma. I can't poke any holes in this. This is tight as a fucking drum in a disturbing way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing they tell George C. Scott would ring even the slightest bell in a drama if we weren't watching a paranoid thriller called Rage, where we know they're taking advantage of him, and we know they're culpable, and we know that it's all about the cover-up so they don't get blamed for this murder.
The first moment that we know, I mean, other than the fact that there's, been helicopters flying around and suddenly, the sheep are all dead and his son is bleeding from the nose, is when his doctor is talking to Martin Sheen, who plays kind of the young, smarmy, former military.
Literally, I mean, in some little ways, it's one of my favorite Martin Sheen performances of all time. He is the face of banal evil. I mean, far more so than
evil. Dutiful evil.
Nobody in Coma comes across in the evil, bland way that Martin Sheen does in this film.
And the most insidious moment with him for me, perhaps other than the autopsy, is the moment where he shakes the hand of the good doctor, of George C. Scott's doctor, and he does kind of this weird handshake. I don't know if it's a military handshake. That's
a weird part of the film, because that makes you suspect Richard Basehart far longer than the movie bears out.
Well, that's okay to do, though. That's not so weird.
But that sounds like a movie. That sounds like a movie thing for us to be suspicious about shit.
Well, I read it as like a kind of you and I are part of a club, a higher authority, and you and I need to speak separately. And so I'm giving you a secret sign, which is basically what that is. It's a secret handshake. It's a secret sign, whether it's a real secret handshake or just a way for him to say, hey, I need to talk to you in secret.
Look, I agree with everything you just said, but they muddied the water as far as Richard Basehart's intentionality.
For sure.
For the first half of the fucking movie.
It's a MacGuffin or whatever. It's because I actually thought he was part of it to begin with. And then I thought, oh, no, he's really close to him. And then there was that moment between doctors. But then what he does, I think, as an actor is so just beautiful to watch. This inner turmoil that he's under, this conflict that he's under, that he's not okay with. And you can tell he's not okay with it if you know to look. If you watch it again, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Everybody's amazing in this film. And you can see why Martin Sheen would show up in this movie and everybody would be like, Martin Sheen.
Yeah. He's fantastic. And he's always been really sweet about George C. Scott. He's actually, back when he would do talk shows and stuff in the 70s, about how George C. Scott really, gave him one of his bigger roles early coming up. And it was like a big deal when they actually did Firestarter together. That they got a chance to act together again.
That's right. They worked together in Firestarter. I mean, I think I mentioned to you DOA as a kind of, that this is part of that subgenre of man is already dead on a Revenge-O-Matic.
Which, by the way, I would not mind watching the Dennis Quaid DOA.
Oh, yeah, the one by Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel.
Yeah, I've always had an appreciation for that movie.
Yeah. The thing is, the one guy, the doctor, who has clearly been lying to him,
Bernard Hughes,
who has been overseeing his son's vivisection, who has just been lying to him and has been punting, knowing that he's going to die. George C. Scott seems like such a solid man that it was like he didn't want to show the killing of the doctor, or maybe he doesn't kill the doctor. Whichever it was, I think he leaves it up to us to decide. It's up to us to choose what happened. In my mind, he could only have killed that doctor.
I think he did.
He's running amok. He kills a lot of lesser people in this, and when he's killing people, it seems like my only problem is that some poor cop shows up on the scene, is like, may I help you, sir? And he gets shot in the head by George C. Scott.
Yeah.
But he never quite gets to Martin Sheen.
Well, I don't have a problem with that, because he gets to the guy he can get to, which is Bernard Hughes.
Yeah. And he fucks up their entire operation.
Yeah. But that would be too revenge-matic movie convenient for him to like literally get to Martin Sheen and all the other people on the chain.
He definitely shows
the hypotheses of the movie.
The futility against
that he can only vent his spleen against perfunctionaries.
Yeah, and that does seem what it's like. It's like he rages against the building. Mm-hmm. He rages against the cops.
And he ravages the building, no doubt about that.
Oh, no, he does a number on that building.
He rains hell on the institution, which is the real culprit in this, because every member of this institution thinks that they're doing the institution's bidding and thinks that they're doing the public good.
Yeah, everyone has good intentions. Mm-hmm. Everyone is trying to do their job. Nobody is necessarily fronted as evil so much, except for the doctor, who I just feel like is in the greater good, doing a disservice to
frankly,
humanity.
But to tell you the truth, one of the interesting things is when he finally has Bernard Hughes under at the end of his rifle. And I love when he kills a cat.
Oh yeah,
I
have to say, because you know how much I love cats, and like that.
Fuck that cat.
But I have to say, if anything was going to get me to talk, it would have been that. And that cat just like...
Well, and it does.
That cat...
No, it's why...
I was like, there's very few things that would have probably made me talk in that moment.
Yeah.
Blowing away that cat and having it vaporize in front of our eyes.
No, it's actually really
interesting.
It's actually really interesting that's the big violence that actually George C. Scott presents in the movie. And it's actually funny that, like, obviously that cat had nothing to do with this conspiracy, but it is. But nevertheless, it's cathartic. Nevertheless, you actually feel it in a big way. And as opposed to just like killing the doctor and enjoying that because of the doctor's place in it, it always becomes as much deliciously fun as the doctor's entire line of bullshit completely crumbling in front of George C. Scott. Now all of a sudden he's admitting to everything.
Yeah.
And then and he's such a sniveling worm when he does it that actually becomes more so than the murder. That is almost the justification for the revenge-matic onslaught.
Now this movie's edited, am I right, by Michael Kahn?
One who, if you don't know, is one of the great editors in cinema history, and has been Spielberg's after an early part of the 70s, where he's editing for Warner Brothers, especially. He is editing Rage. He had his Black Belt Jones. Michael Kahn, sometime after Werner Fields, teams up with Spielberg, and then they edit everything together up to this day.
I'm wondering if George C. Scott let the doctor, the good doctor, or the bad doctor rather, live, and that he just left after that scene, and that Michael Kahn cut that out, and without having him killing him,
to suggest that there's a dot. Wow, that would be clever.
Because I'm thinking that that's probably like just in my CSI
I think you're right.
analysis
I think that's probably more correct than not. That's probably exactly what happened, and Michael Kahn created a situation that leaves it a ... with a question mark.
And let's talk for a moment about these kind of brilliant but also slightly wonky transitions.
They're not brilliant. They're wonky.
Well, there is something to be said about in a shot of the present seeing the shot of the future in the same shot.
Look, there's a lot of things you can describe.
And that's like a cubist shot. And for me, as like somebody who appreciates cubism, I was like, oh listen, I'm not, he overuses it. But there's two moments in there where we're in.
There was one of them that worked. I can't remember which one that worked.
There was the one where the truck is driving toward us, and we see him, and then the camera pans to the distance, and we see the tent, and they're actually at the tent already, and they zoom in on it. There was that
doesn't ring a bell, but one of them. After none of them working, one worked. That one doesn't ring a bell. All right, of me going eureka. It pretty much plays like George C. Scott is trying to direct a movie, and it's a little bit like, hey, look, Ma, watch me direct, with these weird slow motion shots out of nowhere that tie into a time cut.
I'm going to make sure everything links together. Just like,
and it takes him 45 minutes to 50 minutes before he drops it, but finally he does drop it. Thank God.
Well, there are some ridiculous moments, like when he drives by, like where it just suddenly they'll do like a kind of everything when suddenly it goes into slow motion.
No.
And someone is doing something goofy, like throwing a rock at a post office box.
Yeah.
and that it becomes like kind of some weird transition, or the sheep to dog transition.
That was terrible.
There were some but he's trying. He's doing little forces, and I'm sure Michael Kahn was no small part of that.
Look, the other bad thing he does as a director, because I'm able to notice it because he does it so often, yet there's one time he does it and it actually works. It's like he doesn't really know what to do with the camera. So he starts like a 3-shot of character, 2 shots or 3 shots of characters, and it's going on. And then he just picks one thing to slow zoom into during the course of the scene. Whether it's a dog's face or somebody's face or a fucking TV screen or some shit going on out a window. And he just does it again and again and again. Nevertheless, he does it with Richard Basehart, and it's the time when Richard Basehart is realizing that these people have been giving him double talk, and he actually has not been serving his patients in the correct manner. And it ends on Richard Basehart's face, but it doesn't even end on Richard Basehart's face. It continues on Richard Basehart's face for like another 2 minutes, and Basehart holds it together because we're completely with him. As much as those other shots don't work, this works completely effectively. This is exactly what he meant to do the entire time, and it works really great. But then after that, he drops all that stuff, and now he just actually starts making the movie. Now he's not dealing with perceptions of how cinematically it should play, and he's just actually down to the drama at hand, which is why you want George C. Scott making the movie. Are you on George C. Scott's side from the beginning to the end?
Oh, you know I am.
No, that was a question. I'm asking you. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I absolutely am. I mean, you know that I'm a family man. Mm-hmm. You know that I am suspicious of systems. Mm-hmm. I'm suspicious of groups of people. Like, I believe that individuals in general, generally speaking, are inherently good in nature. I believe people are born innocent and good. But groups of people, mobs, corporations, collections of people tend to do things that the individual would never do. Mm-hmm. They start working in systems together, and they start working in inhumane systems together. Not to be inhumane, it just happens that way. Mm-hmm. You know, just mob mentality is one way of putting it. And so any movie that's about the individual, and especially when it's George C. Scott, you know, any movie that's about the individual who is just at every juncture.
No. Look, watching the movie now, I feel differently than I did before. I mean, having a son now, you know, to understand his confusion and terror when the son's in the truck and he's driving and he in the truck and he's just driving to the hospital. What's going on? I mean, that's just shit-eating and terrifying.
There were 2 things in that moment that just were so real to me, that were like really, really affecting me. One of them was I spoke of already, where he's carrying his son and running. And just how he's doing it, like he's really doing it. Like that's George C. Scott, like carrying that young actor, and he's in it in that moment. And then when they're in the car and he's driving toward, I think it's the hospital, and he's going through the parking lot and he's just leaning on his horn like beep, 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 as he's like roaring through the parking lot, which is like on one hand,
shit-eating panic.
Yeah, you're in panic and you're just like, you don't give a fuck about any of the mores of society, you know. Yeah. You know, it's like, I'm going to lean on my horn and honk on it, and I'm going to like clip other cars, and I'm going to like drive over. I'm like, my son is dying. Yeah. It's primal. And then to have the people you trust slowly erode away, like, you know, just like sand washing away at the ocean. If you take away everything from a man, if you take away all the things he's loved, he's left with nothing. Then all you have left is rage.
Well, I mean, one of the things, very well said. You know, we watched that movie the other day, last week, the Western that Kirk Douglas wrote and directed, Posse, with Bruce Dern. And we described it as a Watergate Western. Now, this movie is made before Watergate, but if it was made in 75 or 76, it would be considered a complete allegory for Watergate, because it covers the Watergate aspect where it's not about the break-in at the hotel, it's about the cover-up, and the evil aspects about everything are all about the cover-up.
Well, it could just as easily have been about Operation Sea Spray in 1950, where the government sprayed bacteria during a warfare test on San Francisco, and affected the entire population of San Francisco with all sorts of bacteria. I made a list, from the Tuskegee syphilis study to the Navy-sponsored beef blood transfusions in 1940s, to Willowbrook, to Operation Big Buzz, to the measles vaccine experiments where they were giving drugs. I mean, there is no end to the well-meaning groups of people attempting to do good and bringing about suffering on to many. And Rage captures that because, again, there's not really anybody who's evil. Nobody's really evil. Just everybody thinks they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Like we're supposed to stop a public panic, right? We're supposed to, do this, right?
But it's also, it's their constant lying to George C. Scott is what comes across.
Right, but for the betterment of the greater good, supposedly.
Well, for the
and that's what groups of people do that an individual wouldn't do. Like, Richard Basehart, is the good man in this, and even he gets pulled along into the lie to the point where he can't swallow it anymore. He can't live as someone who
lies like that to another. Even though he calls himself, I'm just a little family doctor or whatever, I'm just a general practitioner. He's the one who knows enough to be able to put two and two together. He's the one that has enough learning when it comes to the medical profession to put two and two together and realize I've been gullible.
Yeah.
I've been gullible and I have not been taking care of my patient in the right way.
Well, and there's no mistake that Martin Sheen at a certain juncture suddenly is wearing a military uniform.
Yeah.
That suddenly we realize, wait a minute, he's a military doctor.
Yeah.
He's not just the young new doctor. He's literally a military
doctor. If it was the Andromeda strain, he'd be one of the main people. In the
completely.
cast.
And they've got sort of an Anthony Fauci type guy there who's sort of their civilian pragmatic person of, I'm just saying people are going to die. I'm just telling you the facts.
Oh, the Robert Walden character.
Yeah, the Robert Walden. He's wonderful.
Janeway. Yeah, I know he's terrific.
Is that his character's name, Janeway?
Janeway, yeah. He's the Anthony Fauci. Oh, make no mistake. They're all going to die. Yeah. And I would just wrap this up to just say that George C. Scott's performance is fantastic in this movie. And one of the things that George C. Scott has always been very good at, and I can even point out a couple of other examples, is playing grief. Like, for instance, one of the best capturing of grief that I've ever seen in a movie is a scene in The Changeling. Because in that movie, he loses his wife and kid at the very beginning in an auto accident. And then there's just this moment, you see him, 45 minutes later into the movie, he's in the haunted house and he's crying. It's just in the morning, he's crying. He's just like he misses his wife and son and he's having a crying jack in the morning. And then all of a sudden he starts hearing this boom, boom, boom in the house. And it interrupts his crying jack. You actually see him stop his emotional crying, just like, what the hell is that? And but just him crying alone, apropos of nothing, but we know what he's crying about. He's lost his family. Has always been one of the most powerful demonstrations of mourning and of pain that I've ever seen in a movie. And the same man who did that scene directed this movie and starred in this movie to, I think, a really wonderful degree.